Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The new COVID-19 variant Omicron continues to spread rapidly. The federal government is making a number of recommendations and reinstating some restrictions. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
At Friday's COVID briefing, Dr. Theresa Tam says Canadians need to think seriously about adjusting their holiday plans. That's because the Omicron variant has health officials scrambling to adjust. Reports say its rate of infection is much higher than the Delta variant and will surpass it in coming weeks.
I'm urging Canadians across the country to please carefully consider and adjust your holiday plans to minimize risks and maximize layers and quality of protection for you and yours. As well, given the significant risks and uncertainties associated with rapidly expanding spread of the Omicron variant worldwide, Canadians are advised to avoid all non-essential travel outside of Canada at this time.
The federal government also announced it is reinstating COVID-19 molecular tests for all travelers returning to Canada beginning Tuesday. This includes those who have been out of the country for less than 72 hours. The health minister says he understands Canadians are COVID fatigued, but must continue to be resilient.
You have made a lot of sacrifices. I know that we are all sick of this pandemic. I know that this is psychologically and mentally difficult, but we Canucks have been through that. We've come this far. Now is not the time to give.
Duclos assured Canadians that the government has a large enough vaccine supply to meet coming demand.
3.5 million older Canadians have received a booster dose as of now. We have 22 million additional booster doses available. So 22 plus 3.5, that gives 25.5. So we're not far from the 30 million doses that we would need to give every Canadian a booster dose.
The government also announced it is lifting the travel ban on 10 southern African countries effective Sunday because the Omicron variant has already spread throughout Canada. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now, while Indigenous communities are doing their best to keep citizens safe from COVID-19, there are currently over 900 cases of the virus on First Nations across the country. Here's Sarah Connors with a look at COVID-19 across Canada.
As of December 16th, data from Indigenous Services Canada states there are 921 active cases of COVID-19 in First Nations communities. That includes the Vuntut-Gwitchin First Nation in Old Crow, Yukon, a fly-in community of 250 people. As of yesterday, there were 8 active cases and 5 presumptive cases in the community. It's assumed the cases are linked to the Delta variant.
We simply can't afford losing one community member.
Chief Dana Tisha Tram says he's concerned for the welfare of his people, especially elders.
The variant, which this is more than likely responsible for, could potentially really decimate our traditional knowledge in the community.
Tisha Tram says the First Nation is taking action. A rapid testing mobile clinic has been deployed to Old Crow to see how many cases are in the community. Travel is limited to essential only, and the community is under a self-isolation order for 2 weeks.
All of our governments are really working hard to support our community.
But most recently, we've been told about a new threat, Omicron variant.
In Manitoba, there's a few cases of the new Omicron variant, though health officials are on high alert as case numbers are likely to increase. The province is recommending that anyone 18 or older who lives in a First Nations community and who has received their second dose on or before July 10th get their third dose of vaccine.
We need as many Manitobans to get that vaccine in the next 2 weeks before what we know is going to be a large amount of gathering during our holiday season.
Perhaps one of the hardest hit First Nations is Six Nations in southwestern Ontario. It's one of the largest First Nations in Canada, with around 13,000 people living on reserve. There is currently 21 active cases in the community. The First Nation is also grappling with the low vaccination rate. Around 48% of the First Nation is fully vaccinated, compared to the provincial rate of around 76%. Six Nations health leadership was not available for comment. Meanwhile, the Buckinghamshire Mi'kmaq Nation in Antigonish County, Nova Scotia, is also reporting a handful of cases. A health official told APTN there is around 26 cases in the community of 600 people. There is now a curfew in place, and community stores and businesses are to remain closed until further notice.
It's very important we contain this and we don't spread this to further community members.
Earlier this week, Chief Francis wrote to the Strait Regional Centre for Education, informing it that Buckinghamshire students would not be attending school for the rest of the year out of precaution. Francis says the First Nation is doing all it can to keep citizens safe.
We have to stay together and fight this together.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Now, Manitoba just announced new restrictions moments ago that go into effect next Tuesday. Now, they include indoor and outdoor capacity limits. Gyms, movie theaters, restaurants, and libraries are also being reduced to 50%. Now, those new health orders will last 3 weeks until January the 11th. And the Dene Nation in the Northwest Territories has chosen a new chief to lead them for the next 3 years. Now, Charlotte Mort-Jacobs attended the swearing of the oath of office and met up with Dene National Chief Gerald Antoine.
It's a new day for the Dene Nation with a new leader, Gerald Antoine, a veteran Dene politician from Nilliquet, where he served as chief until earlier this year.
It's probably one of the greatest honors any Dene could receive, to be called on and to be given the blessing to serve the chiefs.
Antoine says in his leadership, he'll draw on Dene teachings.
There's two priorities in our way of life, and one is the land, and the other one is to do with the relationships. The first relationship is to do with the land. The second relationship is to do with us. And the third one, it has to do with relationship with other people. And the elders really insist that there is a process that you do that, and that's the spirit and intent.
For the first time ever, ballots were cast electronically, and of the 216 votes cast, Antoine defeated incumbent Norman Yakalaya 128 to 88 votes.
I hope that Norman is listening somewhere, somehow, and I hope that he also knows that we thank him for his efforts.
Chief Antoine says the Canadian government sees Indigenous people as add-ons or afterthoughts.
And if you look at what's going on with the child and family reform proposals today, their judicial system saying, look, you got to do this, but here, you know, they're just at the end of an appeal system, and they're working in a device to try to get out of that, even though they were told, hey, pay up. And so they've been fighting our children.
Well, considering this a transitional period, Antoine says he's already calling on Dene families to play a role as the nation rebuilds.
And if you look at our history, we set nets, snares, we go hunting, we cut wood, we cut logs like this. So here we have Dene people that have a way of life that is really reflects the Dene economy, and it's sustainable. It's a relationship with the land. And so there's an opportunity for them to work with us.
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
A judge in St. John's halted proceedings against 9 correctional officers facing charges in the death of an Inuk man in 2019. Jonathan Henoch from Nain, Labrador died in hospital after a confrontation with the officers. Now, the judge in the case said the Crown hadn't shown any evidence that the officers acted improperly. One officer is still facing a charge of negligence causing death. Henoch was in the provincial jail in St. John's awaiting trial for the murder of an 88-year-old woman in Labrador. And Manitoba's chief medical office examiner has ordered an inquest into a fatal police shooting. A Winnipeg police officer shot and killed 22-year-old Stuart Kevin Andrews in April of 2020. Andrews was the third police shooting involving an Indigenous person in just a 10-day period. Now, the officer had been investigating an armed robbery. Andrews was shot 5 times in the chest, and he was taken to hospital and declared dead. A date for the inquest has not yet been announced. All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, 4 First Nations in BC are exploring making a bid for the 2030 Winter Olympics. Welcome back. It's been 11 years since Vancouver and Whistler hosted the 2010 Winter Olympics. Now the 4 host First Nations have signed an MOU to explore the potential of making a bid for the 2030 Winter Olympics. APTN's Tina House joins us from Vancouver.
It's been 11 years since the 2010 Olympics was here in Vancouver and Whistler. Joining me today is Chief Wayne Sparrow of the Musqueam Indian Band. Chief Sparrow, can you tell me about the latest MOU that was signed among the 4 host First Nations for the 2030 Olympics?
Yeah, it was led by the 4 host nations of coming forward. The city of Vancouver and the municipality of Whistler had some preliminary discussions about hosting, and it was the leadership again from the city of Vancouver and Whistler by mentioning that in the 2010 Olympics we were asked to come and be part of the bid and the bid process from the IOC. This time around, we were inviting the mayors to come along with us, which would be the first Indigenous-led games, and it was fully supported by both mayors to go ahead and sign the MOU and take the first step forward to have a first Indigenous-led Winter Games here in Vancouver.
That's exciting. Now, what's the next step going forward now? The MOU has been signed. Now what?
Now we have to go and talk to, we've talked to the Canadian Olympic Committee, and they were at the press conference, and now the next steps would be to explore and then also talk to the province and the federal government about working together to go the next step in the bid process. So it's early in the stages.
Okay, and here we are with the actual pavilion, the Indigenous pavilion that was in the 2010 Olympics behind us. It stands proudly here on the Musqueam lands. I mean, the performances, the culture, the teachings that were shared with everyone around the world was incredible. What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see as a legacy from the next games if it does come back to Vancouver?
Build on that legacy that we did in 2010. Like you mentioned, the pavilion was here for the Indigenous communities, and to build on that and include all of First Nations across the province and across the country to how we can build to make the games a lot more presenting our culture and our teachings and a little bit of our history, and using the world stage to do that would be something that we'd love to accomplish.
That's amazing. I mean, I remember watching the opening ceremonies, and the 4 host First Nations had representatives speaking in their language. I was so proud to witness that moment, to hear our Indigenous language being shared with the rest of the world. What would you like to see happen as something different in the next games, if that does happen?
To build it and make it a better games, and have that opportunity to across the whole world to be the first Indigenous-led games, and us welcoming the world, the nations, not just being part of it, but leading it and having the ones that own the land welcome to our province and to our country.
That's incredible. And also the sportsmen and also like the athletes, the Indigenous athletes that could possibly participate. Is that right?
That'd be perfect if we could have more, build on the successes we've had from Indigenous people to participate in the games would be wonderful. And to have our young kids look at those role models and have them build so that maybe in 2034 or 2038 that we have more First Nations, Indigenous, because they're great athletes and they just got to get the confidence and they could represent not just the Indigenous people but Canada.
That's exciting. Chief Wayne Sparrow, thank you so much and good luck with your bid.
Thank you.
Back to you in studio.
Certainly something to keep an eye on in the future. And now a look back at one of our previous stories. A well-known Alaskan master carver was in the Yukon, helping a First Nation there carve a traditional Tlingit canoe. As Sarah Connors tells us, there's more behind this impressive canoe than just beautiful woodwork.
In Haines Junction, the smell of cedar fills the air. After 2 months of work, this 30-foot-long dugout canoe is being turned right side up. It's cause for celebration. This is Alaskan master carver Wayne Price's 13th dugout.
Where's this boat going to go?
He was hired by Champagne and Asiac First Nations to teach the ancient Pacific Northwest Coast art form to a handful of apprentices. The red cedar was sourced from Prince Wales Island in southeast Alaska. It's estimated to be 450 years old.
The western red cedar gave its life for us to take it, bring it here, carve it, and work on it, and give it a new life.
These dugouts are a source of healing. Several years ago, Price struggled with addictions. During his recovery, he says the creator told him to make healing dugouts.
The creator said, as we're carving the dugout, each chip represents a life we've lost to alcohol and drugs in Indian country. And of all the chips that come off the dugout, there won't be enough.
Price says this dugout is healing for those struggling with addictions, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the discovery of children's graves at former residential school sites. He says this wood is powerful medicine for those in pain.
I've seen many miracles for being at the helm of a master carver digging dugouts. The creator told me it would work, and it does. I've seen it work. I've seen it work a lot. So I'm not afraid to say that I'm changing some lives. Yeah, most definitely.
Apprentice Loris Patterson-Smith is one of those people. He's from the Carcross-Tagish First Nation and never learned the ancient tradition until now.
It's really important in our culture to know this type of stuff. And it's something that's slowly disappearing, but with Wayne traveling around and teaching everybody, I don't think it will disappear now.
He says working under Price has inspired him to pursue his passion for carving.
Starting on this job, I think it really pushed me towards carving. I think I'm going to continue it.
It's satisfying, like just seeing like the grain come down, seeing each chip fall away, and yeah, it's fun.
Champagne and Asiac apprentice Jay Reed barely carved before working with Price. He's pleasantly surprised by how much progress was made in such a short span of time.
From having like all of us some of us have never touched a knife before, to building a canoe is pretty insane.
He says working on the dugout helped him reconnect with his Tlingit heritage.
Well, there's so much history in canoes. Like, it's been a part of like the coastal life. Like, every day was for the canoe, basically.
Building a dugout like this takes time, and there's still much to do. Price and the apprentices will finish as much as they can this week before the dugout is stored for the winter. Next spring, Price will travel back to the Yukon to finish the job. He and others will then travel on the dugout from Haines, Alaska to Juneau for a Tlingit gathering and celebration. The apprentices have also committed to going on a long journey with Price on the dugout they helped create.
It's been proven to me many times that the Pacific Northwest's culture and art has been our ally since for 10,000 years and time immemorial. Why should we ever doubt it? It's going to take care of us today, take care of us tomorrow, and into the future as well.
Can I get a hoo-ha? Hoo-ha! 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 Hoo-ha!
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Haines Junction.
We need to take one final break, but still ahead, there's a new art installation at the Forks in Winnipeg. We'll tell you about it when we come back. Welcome back. There's a unique new art installation at the Forks in Winnipeg. Anishinaabe artist Jamie Isaac created the work called The Eighth and Final Fire. Michelle Kerlenzig was there for the reveal and has more.
The eighth and final fire can be interpreted different ways. Artist Jamie Isaac drew inspiration from her nana, Elder Mary Corshane, who was a residential school survivor. The piece was revealed yesterday and was commissioned by the Winnipeg Foundation and the Forks. The steel structure features 8 fires aligned in a row. Jamie Isaac says the fires represent reconciliation.
And so each of the fires that you see points to a generation, a timeline in history, that we are currently the 8th fire, and that we currently are the 7th fire, and that the 8th fire will be lit when both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples work together to choose a path of collaboration, a foundation of good relationships. And I'm going to repeat that again because I think that's what we can think of reconciliation. I think it's more better to think about it as a foundation of relationships and one built on respect and reciprocity.
All right, that's all we have for you on this Friday edition of APTN National News. We leave you tonight with a classic Christmas carol performed by Amanda Gendron. Amanda is Dene and Cree from Alberta. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.
So